Hello everyone, I'm very excited to say that my new design course is available. You can find out all about it by following the link in the description of this video. I wanted to share a preview video from the course to give you an idea of what's in store. This one is from the design demonstration module, and in this unit, I take you through the process of conceptualizing a hypothetical video game. Mine is a fun hack and slash based on Mary Shelley's Gothic classic Frankenstein. But as you do the 10 assignments in this course, you'll be making up your own game with its own themes, its own assets. It's a very intense creative challenge. You'll be working towards delivering a mock-up inventory screen for your game, which requires you to design characters, items, and skill icons to populate the UI. It's a fun, engaging way to learn the foundations of design for those who love entertainment art and drawing in general. This is just the first video in the character design portion, where I developed Frankenstein's monster and my antagonist, his creator, Victor Frankenstein. I hope that you like it. It's a little subversive. It's not the usual process you might have heard of, but I'll leave it there and let you enjoy the video. And if you do get the course, I look forward to seeing your work and giving you feedback. Let's start working on our characters. We're going to begin with an exercise that I call Meet Your Character. Now, a lot of people will be coming in with the assumption that when you start doing a character design, you should begin with your character sort of very flat, maybe in a very neutral pose, and you're sort of moving shapes around. If they have clothes, you're like working with value shapes and lines and trying to sort of abstractly design them nice so that their outfit looks good. That is not actually where character design begins. That is a part of character design, but that part can be more strictly construed as costume design. What does it mean to really design our character? In almost all applications, a character begins with their personality and with their story and the way that they interact with the story of the project they are in. So when you do this exercise, I want you to just take a break from thinking that you are here to design your character. Though that will inevitably, automatically happen, what you're really trying to do is figure out who your character is and how they behave. Hence, meet your character. So I know that this can seem very strange or maybe like it's all happening very suddenly. In fact, for some of you who have different art education backgrounds, if you've learned a bit of character design, this may seem utterly subversive. It might seem that this is what should come last in the process. But I have seen in my time in the entertainment industry that no, actually, this is how professionals get character design done, and this is where all projects start, with character design. I'm not saying that T-poses never happen. I'm not saying that turnarounds never happen on a project. They happen on almost all projects at some point, and people may say that that point that they occur at is early in the process, but it's never the start, not actually. The start is always emotional story sketches. That is where you find the real character, the nature of the character. And they can look like a lot of things. I would advise you to keep them simple, but it can look like a lot of different characters if it's very open-ended for you what you want your character to look like. It can be mood and emotional sketches where it almost looks like a different character in every sketch. That's fine. That's fine. It is the way that a sketched character feels and sympathizes with the kinds of story moments that occur in your project that determines if they're a good fit for the project. That's where we really want to start. So I'm going to show you some examples of my sketches. And I think that that will make it more clear what I'm getting at. But just to lay the groundwork here, what are we trying to do here? What are we trying to find with these sketches? First off, we want to find out how our character acts, right? Imagine if you were, instead of designing a video game or something like that, imagine if you needed to perform your character on stage as an actor. Think of everything that you would need to do to make the performance compelling. How would you need to emote to present this character? How would you need to move your mouth? How would you need to speak? Would you need to change your voice? How would your character walk across the stage? Would they walk in an insecure fashion? Would they strut? Do they own the room? Do they shrink away? If your character is in a game where they fight, how do they fight? Are they sophisticated and careful, or are they more brutish and aggressive? These are the most important questions about a character. It doesn't even really compare what the pouch on their belt looks like. These overall questions are infinity times more important than the costume design questions. And as much as we love designing costume, that's just the way it's always going to be. So on top of the way they move, the way that they act, and the way that they emote, we also want to project ourselves into how do they feel emotionally, right? That would be another part of performing them on stage. You want to know, are they prone to emotion? Are they withdrawn from emotion? Whatever emotions they feel on the inside, how much do they express them, right? Are they a very emotional person who hides that fact, or do they wear their emotions on their sleeve? All of these things are going to get into the drawings of them. Well, at least they're going to get in there if you want to do great characters. You want to be able to convey these things. And the best way to find these things is to sketch them in story moments and in action. And that will tell you what works and what doesn't work for this character, what kinds of clothing are or aren't appropriate for this character. It will give you way more answers to all of your questions than just beginning with what kind of boots do they wear. As you pursue this, I would advise you to basically become a crazed child again. So I do advise you, I'm literally advising you as your teacher right now, and I do this, to spend time walking around your house acting like your character, the way that you imagine your character doing. While I've been working on this Frankenstein project, many times have I stomped around my apartment going, like pretending I'm him fighting and doing combat. I've acted out little scenes. You know, I'm in the shower washing my hair and I'm talking like the way I think Frankenstein will sound, sort of trying to intimidate Victor or something like that. Like, just let yourself go there. No one ever need know that you do this. I know I just revealed that I do, but you can keep it a secret as much as you'd like. And you don't have to do this in front of everybody. It's just a way for you to inhabit the character, and this will always, always feed back into the drawings and make them better. Again, think of it in terms of acting. This is something that animators know very well. You can only draw and bring to life the kinds of characters that at least a little bit you can embody. You know, there has to be a little bit of them inside of you, some empathy with their personality in order to be able to draw them. And maybe animation makes that more explicit because you literally need to understand it enough to sort of move their face around that way and to move their body that way. But it all goes for just still character designs as well. So take looking for this connection with the character very seriously. This is where all the best character designers in the world start. So now let's take a look at what I've got here. These are the sketches that I did to meet my character, Frankenstein's monster, the player character in my game. To start off here, I am sketching in a program called Leonardo. This is a very simple little drawing app that I think is officially still in beta. The drawing tools are pretty rudimentary, you know, limited number of brushes, but what's there works nicely. And the best thing about it, the reason that I've been using it lately, is that it has infinite canvas. So you can just keep scrolling to the right, left, up, down, and just keep drawing, 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 drawing. And for me, that's really great because I love doing a high volume of sketches when I design, and I love seeing everything all at once. So Leonardo has been a real pleasure in that regard. You can check it out online. It's pretty cheap to get a full license for it. Now I have my sketches broken up here into 4 rough categories: faces and expressions over here. I've got the body over here. I have in-game actions over here. And I have story moments over here. Now, mind you, when I was actually doing this sketching, I did it all jumbled up, everything mixed together. I'll show you the original file before I switched it. So this is how I started sketching all this. So you can see that bodies are mixed in with heads, and in-game actions are mixed in with bodies, and just everything is all jumbled together. It's really just flowing stream of consciousness. And I just kept scrolling to the right, to the right, to the right, looking for the next thing that I wanted to draw, and really just following my nose and my interest. But yes, I did then organize everything a little bit just to make it a little clearer for you all. I would advise you to look for all 4 of these types when you are doing your sketches. And remember to focus on just energy, just the qualities of acting and personality and movement that we discussed in the intro. For a lot of people, it's usually easiest to start with the faces and expressions, and that was the case for me. These were the first things that I drew. I didn't really move on to the bodies until I had drawn a bunch of these. And you can see that some of my very earliest sketches are just completely off stylistically. I'm really just doing my first impulsive, normal way of drawing faces and heads, and then putting some vaguely Frankenstein's monster style lines and stitching over them. But pretty quickly, I start finding my way and remembering that I want this to be a little bit more stylized, a little bit more fun, and looking for a solution that's just a little stranger and a little bit more appealing. I think I remember it was this drawing that first kicked me into the direction that I wound up going. I liked that profile. I think these are a little out of order. I think this one led to this one. I remember this drawing was also a big one for me. That felt like a touchstone for the character. You'll notice that it also captures personality, you know, his inquisitiveness. He's not just completely brutish. When you do these expressions, these faces, you want to start even these with raw emotion. Something that I often advise people is to just start with an emoji, right? Like there's a reason that that works, right? That does communicate the basis of a happy smile in the most simplified terms. You can actually just start with that and then complicate this until you have a character. That's a pretty silly character, but I hope you can see that it forces the expression to come through. If it's literally there at the very beginning, it almost ensures that it's going to carry through to the end. And it's also much easier to put a smiley face into perspective than it is to put a fully detailed smiling face into perspective. You'll notice that as I go, I made some notes to myself. You know, when I found that the nose shape, if I cut off the nose and did a skull nose, would be the same as those Gothic heart shapes that I found in so much of my thematic reference, I make a little note to myself of that. You see that when I start refining things down, I make a note to myself here of the shape design that I found. So it's a modified square with opposing triangles. So that is indicating that the basis for his head is a square that gets modified, but you can see that that sketch, this sketch, for all of the details, they are roughly square. It's roughly perfectly square, not rectangular. And then the design is driven internally by these triangles that oppose the overall square. And there's some sub-triangles happening over here, pinching the square in. So if you remember our discussions about shape design, that's the kind of stuff that we were getting at. Exterior shape, square. And then to contrast it, we do triangles on the inside. And you'll notice that with this character, some of those are real triangles. There's lines that actually construct those triangles, and some of it is implied triangles. Now, for most people, once we have a bit of a grip on the face, that becomes a natural lead-in to how we want to do the body. The face already implies things about weight, about character, that are going to tell us if we want a big character, a small character, someone who's a little bit lither, someone who's a little bit more chunky. All of that stuff definitely is being implied already in just the head and the face. The portrait is a gateway to everything about the character. So people naturally find that that will lead to the body. But it's also fine to start with the whole body if that connects better with you. Now, of the 4 categories that we have here, the face, the body, action, and story, I'm gonna say that the body is the least important one. You'll notice that in these body sketches, there's not much action going on. Maybe there's a little bit of posing going on in one like this, but you wouldn't say that any particular in-game action or story moment is occurring. It really is just a way to look at the body. And given everything that we've said, I think you'll understand that that actually doesn't give us as much information as the other aspects, right? So it's useful and it's a natural thing to explore, and we're going to go into more depth with thinking this way when we look at the body type variations in the next section. But feel free to do this here. Just keep in mind that this is probably where you want to spend the least of your mental energy. This is going to give you the least information, the least character information. Now, once a body sketch starts growing up and evolving, and it is giving a lot of character information, it quickly becomes either a story sketch or a sketch of an in-game action. Now, before we look at those, let me just say, if it seems to you, looking at these, like I already had a pretty clear idea of what my Frankenstein's monster was going to look like, and it doesn't feel like there's a ton of searching going on in these sketches, I did have a clear idea for what I wanted him to look like, and that is probably going to happen to you as well as you work through this. And if it doesn't just yet, you are going to get there as you get better at running projects. Now, why is that? It's because I'm directing the project. Everything that we've done with the thematic treatment and all of the writing that we did, and writing our log line and writing all of the breakdowns for the assets, all of that is me being the creative director on the project. And again, it may be a little awkward for you early on because you maybe have never done this before, but as you get better and better at running these projects, you will find that a main character especially is usually not a mystery, usually not a completely open book. When people talk about character design in the abstract, in teaching and online, there can often be this weird assumption that it's, all right, your main character might be extremely tall and skinny. They might be very squat and wide. They might be muscular. They might be thin. They might be anything. And the truth, not just in personal projects, but on professional jobs as well, is that it is extremely rare that a main character is an open book like that. No. 99 times out of 100, if you are working on a job where you are going to do some design work on a character, whether it's all the way at the beginning or there has already been a bunch of work done on this character, you are going to get some serious amount of writing, probably from a professional writer, about the character. You are going to get a prompt, you are going to get a brief from the creative director or art director of the project, and there will already be an idea of who this character is and what they are supposed to communicate to the audience. And so it is very rare that that will not make some upfront decisions about their age, their body type, what kinds of emotions they're supposed to convey. Like, are they a frightening and intimidating character? Are they a friendly and inviting character? It is very, very rare that a very important character does not have those things already established in the thinking, in the writing. So for me, I knew from my writing and from the genre that I wanted to work in and imagining how I wanted the game to feel, that I wanted my Frankenstein's monster to feel strong, to feel kind of hulking. And indeed, some of my touchstones in my head for him were Hulk from Marvel Comics and Venom from Spider-Man. The proportions of those characters, the way that those characters move and interact in movies and video games, they were easy benchmarks for me for this character. Now you'll notice that, yeah, I did explore some more typical proportions. This guy's maybe a little taller and thinner, maybe not as tall and thin as that guy over there. This one has almost totally normal human proportions. And I explored some even squatter and wider and more ridiculously beefy shapes. But for the most part, I was in this middle zone with, very top-heavy proportions, short legs, the head tucked in. And that's fine. That is fine. There are very few practical design applications where, again, for a main character, you're just gonna have nothing to go off of. That is quite rare. It's different for background characters, secondary characters. There, yes, it is more common to be like, well, this character is very ill-defined, so they really could just be tall and skinny or short and wide, very strong or very weak, because we just don't know who they are. In effect, your sketches will just be beginning cues to make those writing decisions, those creative direction decisions. But for a main, it's very rare that you're not going to have any of those ideas up front. So keep an eye out for that as you work on your project. Know that if you really feel like your character just has no defining characteristics, it's probably because you haven't thought about them enough, that you need to go back to the thematic treatment, that you need to go back to the asset sheet and just spend some time thinking and writing. And like I said, imagining what it's like to be them. Imagine their emotions, imagine how they move, imagine how they interact. Once you have some ideas around body type, and you could see that on a few of these, I was still playing a little bit with body type, but for the most part, I was feeling pretty confident, like I really liked the general proportions I was finding with the more hulking, more top-heavy character. It's a good idea, once you have a bit of a grip on that, to do in-game actions. These are so fun. You're gonna find few things that are more fun to sketch than this. And everybody might be doing different kinds of games, so everybody's gonna have different kinds of actions, but see what you can pull out and just do these quick, energetic sketches of the kinds of thing this character will do in the game. This is so helpful, way more helpful than doing costume design sketches, because if these are the actual things the character will be doing, that will let you know what kinds of costumes make sense and don't make sense, right? For example, if you do your in-game actions and you find, oh yeah, I need this character to do a lot of acrobatics, for example, that is going to save you from having to waste time putting heavy armor on this character. Does it really make sense for this character who, when you get into what they're gonna do in the game, is mostly leaping around and doing backflips and pirouettes, does it make sense to cover them in super heavy armor and pauldrons that block views of their face and things like that? No, it doesn't. So it's going to save you from having to needlessly explore that whole essentially random niche of costume design because you know what the character actually needs to get up to in the game. This also gives you base information about what kinds of proportions are useful. Here when I'm doing these melee attack sketches, it really lets me know that I want those arms to be huge. I was super happy with how this punch looked with just the ridiculously oversized arms arranged that way. I was really happy with how this slam looked with those big arms sort of crunching up at the top, and then just like the angles and the raw weight that is made by that huge mass coming down there. And yeah, again, I was acting these out as I was drawing these. I actually imagined these as basically a sequence of, hitting the attack button or something like that. There's a lot of other things he's going to be using. So I thought, why not, if you've got just the melee arms equipped, that is to say Frankenstein's monster's normal arms, why can't he just do a whole variety of attacks in his chain? So it's just like feeling the kick slide forward, going into the knee, doing the punch, doing the headbutt, doing the slam, doing the haymaker. And yeah, as I'm doing these, like I said, I'm going, I'm really trying to feel like that character. The noises are absolutely necessary. They're not optional. If you're not grunting like your character, if you're not making the sounds, put the pencil down. It's not right for you, right? You're not having enough fun. So just make sure that you're having a lot of fun. I could do a million sketches like that, mixed in a little bit of some of the weapons that I have designed in the item chapters as well, sort of firing the alchemical cannon and getting that little bit of pushback, that recoil energy by having these little dust trails kicking up, pushing him the other way from where it's firing. Slashes with the hook arm. I like slamming the hook arm down here, doing the big uppercut that sort of mirrors the shape of the hook arm so it's sort of like a fractal design. I had a ton of fun doing these. Here you can see Heave Ho, the icon that we designed, that we have the icon and then we can say, all right, this is what it actually looks like when he does the skill and starts throwing something around. A couple sketches here for jumping, for leaping, for simple slashes. I did play with a couple other body types here, imagining, what if he's not just attaching arm parts, but can you do legs as weapon parts? There's whole video games based on having your foot be a weapon, basically. It's not that crazy, all right? It is a thing. Cannonballs, jumping, even just more just traversal animations. So here was me imagining what would it look like if he ran towards a ledge. What's the animation for catching yourself and preventing yourself from going over? Kicking a door in, view from behind like you might actually see in the game. Jumping up to a ledge and grabbing it, then holding the ledge, and maybe you can shimmy left and right. Again, these are from behind because I imagined the game having the camera behind the character, generally behind the character, and you want to make sure that everything looks cool from the actual perspective that it's going to be seen. This sketch is the beginning of something that I really should explore more, but what does it look like when he is armless and he is swapping in a new arm part? So tons of fun. As you can see, these sketches are all extremely simple. They're kept very light, very fun. It's all just black solid ink lines with just pressure sensitivity. It's like you could have drawn these with a Sharpie. None of the individual drawings are especially beautiful or graceful. It is just about getting that energy, that charge. I construct none of this, it's all about graphic shapes. What shapes are gonna make something feel big and aggressive? What shapes are gonna make something feel smooth and delicate? What's gonna make something feel like it's moving, jumping, slashing? Very, very focused on just graphic energy. That's where you should go with these things. And to give you an idea of time, because that is important as well, I think all of these were about, across days, it was probably 3 days of sketching. This is probably 3 days worth of sketching, which is probably 12 total hours of drawing just to do this, There's a lot of sketches here, but not that many, Take your time with it, right? Keep it graphic, be searching, but don't rush. Do not rush. And after you have in-game actions, a great thing to look at is story moments. The in-game actions can give you an idea for how your character moves and how they're going to animate. And then one of the best things you can do is transfer that to how do they look in events that actually happen in the game, in the story. Now for me, that's a little easier to come up with because I'm working from Frankenstein as source material, so I have literal things that happen in the book that I can look at, right? You might need to do a bit more dreaming, a bit more projection to find. But this is where you really get to show the personality of your character. So I loved doing these. I always love doing these. And these are always an opportunity for me to reveal the surprise, right? So I feel like from these sketches, even from the faces, even though the faces are trying to show that he's fun and kind of sensitive, but if you just saw the faces, if you just saw my body sketches, if you just saw my in-game actions, you might not ever guess that the way that I imagine this character is that he's sensitive and has a soft spot. And he does in the original story. You know, the Frankenstein's monster is a polyglot. He speaks multiple languages. He loves reading. He's actually very sensitive. He's just looking for love, baby. He wants a wife, right? I mean, he's a vegetarian, for God's sake. He refuses to eat animals. He subsists only off of berries. He's a very sensitive monster in the original book, something that I love about him. So in these story moments, I got an opportunity to show that. So he loves reading. You know, that might be Paradise Lost, his favorite book that he's holding in his hand. You know, the sketches are rough, so maybe you can't tell, but there's a little book. He's a big guy, right? So the book is small. And he's just barely fitting in this chair, but you can see how eager he is, leaning into the book, wanting to read and connect with what's in there. And just the little smirk on his face while he looks so big and monstrous. I like it. I mean, I like it. You know, it's that surprising element. It shows his sensitivity. Making friends, you know, he just cleared the battlefield of a whole bunch of enemies whose dismembered parts are laying all over. And like I said, he's a vegetarian, he's an animal lover. So he's made friends with a stray dog and he's given them a bone from one of these monstrous creations. And now they're buddies. This is what drawing is about. This is what it's about. If you're not making yourself laugh and giggle and go awe from your drawings, you've got to find that. This is what drawing is about. It's about making it fun for yourself. In the book, in the original Frankenstein book, he saves a little girl from drowning, and she sure is glad that he did that, but her father winds up shooting him. So here's a sketch of him playing patty cake with the girl after saving her from drowning. I thought that was a cute, possible little scene. And then some more abstract ones, just him living in the woods, you know, sort of showing his agility and athleticism, some vaguely like gorilla-like qualities when you put him up in that tree or something like that. A sketch of him coming to town in disguise. That's one of the costumes that I wrote in the thematic treatment, is the long cloak sort of sewn out of smaller ones. Him chopping wood for the hovel. There's a part in the story where he lives in a hidden little hovel attached to a family's house, and he learns from them by listening to them, and he comes to love them. And something that he does in the middle of the day is that he'll sneak out and he'll go chop wood for them, and then he'll leave it in the pile so that they can stay warm throughout the winter, and they don't know that he's doing this. So there's him chopping wood for the hovel to take care of the family that he loves. Him screaming. I was going to do some more sketching around this one, and I just completely forgot. Right now, that just looks like him screaming. That sketch on its own should probably be over in the body sketches. Apologies for that. But here I am playing with another body type. So more traditional, taller, thinner, less top heavy. But again, friends, you know, him connecting with animals. And then some other moments at the end of the story. They spend a lot of time in the Alps and in the Arctic. So I did some sketches of him traversing snowy rocks and him mushing a dog sled team. You know, maybe he has his own dog sled team that he uses to pursue Victor across the Arctic. Because if I remember correctly, in the Arctic scenes, Victor is on a dog sled. So just looking for fun things to cue me into story moments that could occur in this game. A lot of them pulled from things that occur in the book itself. Now, some final notes here before I send you off to try this for yourself. Please remember, if this feels uncomfortable, if this feels like it's all too sudden, you know, like, how was I supposed to gradate into this? You know, I need some more rungs on the ladder, right? It's supposed to feel uncomfortable. It is. It is supposed to feel uncomfortable. What we are talking about here is no small skill. To be good at what is going on here, and by good I mean like really good, is the gateway to one of the most coveted art careers in the world, right? This is not something that we can even reasonably expect ourselves to be great at. This is some of the hardest, most sophisticated, most desirable, best stuff you can do with drawing, and especially in the pursuit of character design. It is going to feel uncomfortable the first 800,000 times that you do it. And you need to accept that and do it anyway. You do. If you get distracted trying to put drawing like this off until you've spent 2 years drawing characters in neutral poses and putting costumes on them, you're never going to do it. And you are only doing costume design if you do that. You are not doing real character design. Character design is about the character, the personality of the character. It is not about their costume. Their costumes emphasize their already established characters. And that is it. That is all the costumes need to do, right? Everything else that we add on top of that is flourishes. If the costume knows who it's on, knows the personality and character of who it is on, and expresses that well with various design elements, it's good. It's great. But if you don't know the character, if you don't know the personality, you're lost. They could be wearing anything, and there's no way to judge it. The personality, the acting, the appeal, the story, the real character comes first. So if your practice intersects with character design at all, I implore you, you need to get comfortable doing this yesterday. And the only way to get comfortable is to do it, even if it doesn't come out great, is to just get through the 800,000 repetitions that it's going to take to get comfortable with it and to get good results doing these kinds of sketches. Remember, they need not be complex, right? I've got basically on this board just hard black lines that are clawing, scraping, chicken scratching their way to shapes that I think work. That's all that you need to do too, and you're gonna get better at it as time goes on. But please, I'm trying to find a way to put this that makes it feel as sharp as it actually is. Start doing this, let it be hard, and never stop. Do it forever, no matter how disappointed you are in the drawings. You're supposed to do disappointing drawings. Do not put this off and think that you are going to magically learn how to do this by going to life drawing, right? I love life drawing. That will supplement these ideas, but this is its own skill set. You can't go do gesture drawing at life drawing for 8 years and then say, I finally earned the right to happily draw characters while inhabiting their body and their mind, and then expect that it's gonna work. It won't. I've seen it not work many times for many people. It turns out you just got good in those 8 years at figure drawing, and you wasted a lot of time that you could have spent practicing character drawing. They're different things. Figures and characters are different things. Figures, characters, costumes, different things. If you want to be great at characters, you have to rehearse drawing characters with spirit and personalities. Let yourself practice it. Let yourself be bad at it, but it is the essential core of character design. So above all else, enjoy yourself. Let yourself go into their heads. Let yourself walk around your house and act it out and really just project into their world, project into the story, project into the game that you are imagining. If you are doing it right, you will be having fun no matter how ugly the drawings come out. I can promise you that. It's like everything else around it, the excitement of the vision, of the acting, of imagining your character moving around and emoting, right? That will be fun in and of itself, completely divorced from the final quality of the drawings. So begin this process, enjoy yourself, and good luck. Okay, by way of demonstration, let's draw Dr. Victor Frankenstein. So I have my thematic text over on the top right in PureRef as always, and I am drawing in Leonardo, as I explained. So as I showed, I'm going to start with some faces. Too old. I think Victor is a bit on the younger side in the book, so I'd like to keep it that way. That's feeling a little closer for the age. But it's not really feeling at all like the stylization that we have going on Frankenstein's monster, so that feels inconsistent, but we'll find it. Keeping these drawings fast, loose, and again, focus on energy, not constructing anything. I'm not sitting here and saying, okay, I need a nose, so the center line of the face is here, and then the nose protrudes from the center line. I'm gonna build a cylinder out for the bridge of the nose, and the alar cartilages are gonna be half spheres, and that's gonna interface with the zygomatic this way, and then the glabella over here is gonna, we're gonna have to do a cylindrical into cube intersection. No, 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 absolutely not. Not while designing, not while seeking ideas. I just say, should he have a pointy nose? Should he have a short square nose? Should he have a button nose that pops out? What do those different types of noses mean for a character? Do they make him feel too cute? Do they make him feel more sinister than is appropriate? Do they make him feel too neutral? And those are all just captured in this. This is what I mean by energy drawing. Button nose, one stroke. Pointy nose, one stroke. Square, snub nose, one stroke, right? It's pure graphic energy. We build everything out of that at this stage. And with practice, you'll get quite sophisticated at what you can do with moves like that. And again, I have to emphasize, that is not some secret drawing ability that is unlocked after years of practice and tons of points invested in a skill tree. No, that's not how it works. It's just something you do right from the start, and you get better at it over the years. It's not something you have to wait to do. So I'm getting an inclination for some sort of a hair metal glam rock hair for Victor. That's shown up in a couple sketches already. Don't know what that's about. think that might be coming from my impression that Victor really does go crazy in the story. You know, making his monster does drive him mad. And his madness only increases as time goes on, so maybe the hair just makes him feel a little more disheveled. Like he's obsessing over something and is not quite taking care of himself. He maybe looks a little bit too much like a rock star here, which doesn't really feel like his character in the story, but it does kind of help him reach the level of being the main villain of our game. So maybe that's okay. All right, let's get into the character a little bit more. Let's show him yelling. Victor has a temper. And we want to communicate. And he spends a lot of time angry. Holding some kind of weapon maybe to defend himself from his creation, the abomination. Vile wretch. It's getting more into a story or full body sketch, but that's all right. As I said when I was showing my Frankenstein's monster sketches, I was mixing everything up, sort of going from one to the other as I drew. You should feel free to do that too. in the end, this all comes down to volume. You know, people have a lot of questions about how do I design a character so that I can draw them consistently, understand their actual facial shapes, their body shapes, so that I can turn them and all that. There's two parts to that answer. One, you do a model sheet at some point, and that's a pretty straightforward affair. You know, you just do an official drawing where you lock everything down, and you're gonna try to match that drawing, the masses of that drawing, whenever you work on this character in the future. And then the other part is just a huge amount of drawing and redrawing them. Gothic Rain, of course, right? Sad, miserable. He's a mope. Victor's definitely a mope. If you draw the same character about 50 times, you'll start zeroing in on what you actually think they should look like. And then once you've drawn them about 500 times, then you will have distilled them down to an understandable notion that you can repeat. You combine that with a model sheet, you will be able to make it feel like the character in all sorts of views. But step one is the sheer volume. Just drawing them a lot. He can wear fancy dandy clothes because he's a rich boy. He comes from a very prestigious family that he's very proud of. For the clothing, I'm vaguely alluding to the things that I've seen in my thematic references that I've gathered, but I'm really not worried about being accurate to them right now. That is something that can always be done later. As we've discussed, I am just going for character, raw character. I want expression and emotion. What this character looks like when he's outraged. This character looks like when he's scared. Slamming the table with his hands. You can see as I'm doing these that there's much more change in Victor as I'm drawing him. I have a less clear picture of what I want him to look like than I did for the monster. So you can still do this kind of sketching even if you're switching around a lot what kind of character you're drawing. You know, is he older, is he younger, face shapes, everything's changing. People kind of have this incorrect assumption that they're not allowed to do these story and emotive kinds of sketches until they're locked in, until they know what the character is going to look like. And that's actually thinking about it all backwards. You want to do these sketches even when you don't know big things about the character, because then you get to see them. You get to compare these different options sort of apples to apples right next to each other, right? What face style, right? Older, younger, whatever it is. When I want to show him studying, when I want to show him, you know, being the great alchemist that he is, you know, looking at his tubes, looking at his devices, studying, do I like that better with an angular face? Does a thinner face make that vibe feel right? Does a more square face make that vibe feel right? Those are the important distinctions. You don't want to be deciding, all right, should he have a square face? Should he have a triangular face? Just off of raw, abstract shape thinking, you know? You might have some ideas like, all right, well, my other character is basically square, so it would be good contrast for him to have a vaguely triangular face to offset my other character. But that alone would not really be the best grounding for a design. That's a good thing to manage, to achieve, if you have something else supporting it, if you have story consideration supporting it, if it works in a broader sense. So you want to find what your character needs for himself, you know, for that character in and of themselves, for what they need to be, for the natural needs of them as a design quandary. That always comes down to story, right? So the questions would be more like, what face shape works to make this character emote correctly when they are angry, when they are vindictive, when they want to destroy something that they have created. Those are real design criteria. Those are the better questions to ask. If you then come to an answer that says, well, a triangular face, it turns out, gives me the widest range of expressions for depicting someone who wants to destroy something that they themselves have created. Now there's a good use for triangles. And then if on top of that, you can say, you can design it so that, oh, and also that gives me a contrast with the monster's face, which is square. Now you're getting somewhere. But on the hierarchy of what should decide your design decisions, story, real character, personality, emotion, those are far, far supersede abstract, shape-based thinking. That shape-based thinking, those raw conceptions of just shape design, shape contrast, those should always be in service to story and to real character. So very different haircut there, pretty different facial shapes. I like that haircut, that more almost, that feels a little bit more mad scientist to me, or just disheveled scientist, rather than this, which is getting a little rock star, a little Van Helsing. So I would say that this is feeling the most like the Victor Frankenstein that I'm used to from the story, but maybe some of these other ones feel more like the final boss of our hack and slash video game. So an interesting balance would need to be struck. Don't worry about anything except emotion when you draw these. You know, I just noticed that like this hand is way bigger than this hand. Who cares? This is not the time to care. Let it go. So let me try to react to that design a little bit. Get a little more anger. Always go for expressions here whenever you can. Just keep them simple. Remember, think emojis. And remember that, just like so much that we've talked about, expressions are not some thing that you're not allowed to do until you've done some random sheet of expressions that are laid out like a bingo card that you found online. It's like, all right, I'm not allowed to sketch expressions on my characters until I've done this bingo card where I do a happy one, a sad one, a mad one, a surprise one. No, just keep it simple. Just, you've seen an angry face in your lifetime. You can put on an angry face and feel what it feels like. You don't need to put it off. You don't need to cast it into the future. After you do some worksheet that you found online, just do it now. Okay, for the sake of brevity, let's leave it there. If I was really going to go through and look for my Victor, then I would probably do 50 or more sketches like this, you know, and that's just the expressions and faces, right? Like 50 is a low number for searching for a character. So that'd sort of be an entry number to just getting like a solid grasp on, oh, I think this is the direction that I want to go with this character. And then you can do literally hundreds and thousands, and those are the numbers that are produced on professional projects with great regularity. But let's just leave it there, you know, and just trying to demonstrate the freedom and rapidity and variety with which you're trying to draw here. And let's just quickly show what some of the in-game action sketches can look like. So we've looked at the faces. Let's start by just putting a little indication of a ground line. I like thinking just in a very schematic way for these kinds of sketches. And let's say, well, I haven't really thought about this, but we know Victor uses the alchemical cannon at some point, but we've already seen that. So let's think of him using something else. Let's draw some melee attacks, and let's say that he uses maybe a knife. You know, he's not going to be a punching brawler because, you know, Frankenstein's monster is already that, and he's much bigger and stronger, right? So let's say that Victor is more inclined to use like a knife and maybe a gun, like a blunderbuss or something like that. So if we're going to do, let's say, a slashing attack, one piece of advice I can give you that really helped me is just put the action literally in the drawing. So we're doing a slashing attack, just put an arrow that actually is the action and draw directly over that. That's one of the best ways to learn how to create follow through and a clear line of action in your drawings. So let me reshape it, maybe something like that. And then just sketch right into that. I've got to say I'm getting a Hunter from Bloodborne kind of feeling for Victor in the back of my head. I think that fulfills the Gothic Victorian theme and also gives cues for how to actually make him threatening in the way that he moves and acts and fights, even while he's a sort of Victorian dandy. So pure energy, these sketches, you can always clean these up later, but what you can never add back in once you've missed your chance is the kind of aggressive energy. So again, just draw the action in there. Very literal. Use things like cloaks and capes for secondary animations, you know, follow through animations. Billowing, supporting the direction of the movement. See if I can leave some room to show the blunderbuss in the other hand. So there's an upward slash. By the way, these sketches have right away made me think he needs a cape. He needs a good cape. You know, that's not necessarily captured in these sketches. He's sort of wearing just a fancy Georgian era jacket, Regency era jacket, but this doesn't necessarily imply a cape, but these sketches are begging for it, right? So that's why we start working with action, you know? You might have just randomly drawn a cape while exploring costumes on a sort of paper doll cutout, but these action drawings demand a cape to make the actions look cooler. So that's why we start with these kinds of explorations. He is supposed to be ingenious and use a lot of devices, right? So let's try to see him doing something a little bit more creative than just swinging a knife. I had thought maybe he should use a flamethrower at some point, because at the end of Frankenstein, the monster ends his own life by self-immolating, by building a funeral pyre and eliminating himself. So that just implies that we know fire can kill Frankenstein's monster. So maybe a flamethrower sort of makes an allusion to that if we have Victor use one. Maybe after he loses the alchemical cannon the first time that you fight him, maybe a flamethrower is what he uses in the boss fight at the end of the game or something like that. Oh, and you don't have to start with a floor line if you find that restrictive. You can always just add that later. Looking for stance. I always draw my figures this way. This is how I start them. It's like, this is not a traditional gesture drawing, certainly not construction. It's it's almost like an elaborate stick figure, that's it. If we put a backpack on him, that might be an opportunity for some steampunky pipes and hoses and dials. Maybe this is jumping away while throwing a grenade or something like that. Smoke bomb. And maybe he can do an AoE of some sort by thrusting some sort of electrical device into the ground. In the story, it's left ambiguous exactly how Victor animates his monster, but it is implied that it uses some sort of electrical means. That's not everything, you know, that gets sort of the hokey movie versions of Frankenstein. They really leaned into that, and it's all about electricity, but in the book, it's more ambiguous. You know, electricity is part of it, but Victor is a master of many things, you know, chemistry and science, and he's obsessed with old occult learnings that he had from his childhood. Almost looks like a sword, how I sketched this device, and that could be cool. So maybe thrust it into the ground. Do some little action lines to imply thrusting. It sets off an electrical AoE. Notwithstanding, of course, the possibility that the monster is immune to electricity because it's part of his reanimation process. And that's basically how you would do it. You would just do dozens and dozens of those and use that to discover how is your character going to move, how do they need to act, what do they need to be capable of, and then that will give you a solid grounding on what their body needs to be shaped like, what kind of clothes make sense and don't make sense. You know, if your character is supposed to be very agile, does it make sense to put them in clothes that feel highly restrictive or something like that? If your character needs to be highly emotive, you know, we can see that in these performances, right? Would it make sense to have giant pauldrons that are constantly in his face, blocking his view so that in almost any shot, you can't see how he's emoting? Probably not. Probably it is better to leave his head a little bit more exposed so that you can see the face clearly in close-ups. These are the things that you discover and will come to understand if you start exploring character with these kinds of sketches. And as I said, tons of fun, way more fun than just starting on very neutral poses. And as you'll see in the next section, the great thing is that when the time comes to do those more neutral poses, those more straight down the barrel, design focused, proportional assessments of just body proportions and things like that, we can just start with these. We can just take drawings that we felt succeeded and that we got excited for, and we can just put them right on the page and say, what kind of neutral body proportion does the character need to have in order to achieve this feeling of movement or this arrangement of shapes when they strike this pose or do this action? And that is, of course, a much more grounded place to start than just random. I could draw any body configuration for no real reason, with no context. What body should it be? It's like, of course, there's going to be a billion possible legitimate answers to that because there's no criteria. There's just no criteria, and you'll go crazy without criteria. So enjoy yourself when you do these, and trust the process. It will give you a much better foundation to build your more straightforward design steps on. Enjoy.